In today's video, I'm going to talk about 5 red flags that tenants should be aware of when dealing with landlords or potential rental properties. Now, previously, a couple of videos before, I think the previous video to this, I made a video about 3 red flags that landlords should be aware of when they're screening tenants. So I'm just only being fair and looking at both sides here. To find that video about the 3 red flags in the tenant screening process, you can probably find the link in the description and it will probably pop up on your screen. But today's video is the reverse of that. It's red flags that tenants should be aware of when they're interacting with potential rental properties or landlords. As always, you can skip to a summary of this whole entire list. You'll see a timestamp on the screen. And here we go. If you didn't skip, as always, please subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your subscription would mean a lot. And you can find my contact information in the description box. Get in touch with me. We can talk about real estate or we can talk about basketball. I'll talk about whatever. Red flag number 5. It's a red flag when the landlord asks for a deposit prior to signing any documentation, any sort of lease, or agreement to lease, any standard form of lease. If they ask for some sort of deposit and then they ask you after the deposit, we shall sign a lease, that's a major red flag. The deposit has to come after the lease has been signed. Now, whatever documentation you're using, that's up to the jurisdiction that the rental property belongs to. But whether it's agreement to lease or the standard form of lease or the government form of lease, whatever it is, a written up contract, the deposit only comes after the lease has been signed. I've known of many situations with people who were tenants and were looking for rental properties and did not use agents, and they submitted a deposit prior to signing anything, even putting in a rental application, and they lost their deposit. Red flag number 4. It's a red flag if the landlord is a property management company and you can't find much information online when you Google the name of the company. Even if the company has a very good website, looks professionally done, if you can't find many reviews, or addresses of current properties that they're managing concurrent to the property you're making an application or offer for, if you can't find much information about this property management company, and if you do, it's even a little bit negative or mediocre, that's a major red flag. After all, it's harder to litigate with companies and incorporated bodies than people. If it comes down to that, if they don't uphold their end of the lease, whatever terms and conditions they agree to, whether it be helping to pay for the cost of a certain utility or helping with maintenance of the grounds, if they don't uphold their end, then it's harder to deal with the incorporated body. All right, the next red flag. Red flag number 3. Red flag number 3 is when they ask you for a pet deposit. Why is this a red flag? Well, in Ontario, once again, I don't know the laws where you're watching this video. I'm an expert in Ontario real estate, more specifically Toronto real estate. But in my jurisdiction, a pet deposit, even though many a landlord ask for such a thing, is illegal according to the Residential Tenancies Act. And I would say 90% of the landlords are aware of the laws and regulations. Perhaps 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 misguidedly ask for such a thing, not knowing the actual law. And there's no, it shouldn't be a red flag. But on average, if they ask you for a pet deposit, you know you're probably not dealing with the best landlord in the world. Because most likely, once again, on average, they already know that such a request is illegal. Red flag number 2. It's a red flag when the landlord refuses to have email correspondence with you. If 100% of the time they prefer to talk on the phone or in person, that means they don't want record of whatever communications you're having with regards to the rental property. That's why email and in the older days, mail correspondences are very important. For instance, let's say your landlord promises to fix something within the next 5 days at his own expense. Now, if he tells you this on the phone and 5 days come and he fixes that certain thing, whatever it may be, but he charges you for it, he sends you an invoice, or he says, hey, when am I gonna get paid for what I just fixed? You're in trouble because there is no written record of the agreement, of him saying I will fix it at my own expense, because you spoke on the phone or in person, wherever it may have been. But if it was an email correspondence, then everything was on the record. He can no longer turn around and say, hey, pay me for what I fixed. You would just point directly to the email exchange you guys had, where he said in the email he would fix it at his own expense, and assumingly you said okay. So if they refuse to have email correspondences, or they don't even give you their email, then that is a major red flag you should be aware of. Red flag number 1. It's a red flag when the landlord prefers to be paid with all cash. Typically accompanying the all cash rental payment is a lack of a lease. So they will probably also ask you not to sign a lease. Why is that? Well, in the first place, the reason they're probably requesting for them to be paid the rental amount in cash is because they don't want to claim it on their taxes. That is to say, they don't want to claim rental income, and they just want to pocket the cash without having to pay any taxes that are applicable on it. For that reason, they most likely will ask you not to sign a lease, because if there's a lease, then there's a written record of a tenancy agreement existing, and there probably will be some complications with the landlord's plan not to pay taxes when there's an agreement to tenant or an agreement to lease on paper, yet somehow you're not getting paid on paper. That doesn't really add up, does it? Most often when they request you to pay your monthly rent in cash, they won't want any lease signed, because that could point towards them being paid some sort of monthly income and rental amounts due that they're not claiming on their taxes. But moreover, putting that aside is also a red flag, because you might pay your rent in cash for that month. Let's say your rent amount due for the month of September is $3,000. You pay it with all cash. It's okay. And in 2 weeks he comes to you and he says, you didn't pay me. If they're not giving you a receipt every time you're providing them with your monthly amount due in cash, right? You have no grounds to stand on, neither does he. So it gets into a really complicated situation. That's why most often, in Toronto, I would say either the monthly amount due is paid with post-dated checks, just checks that month, you write a check that month, certified check for the whole year, or e-transfer or direct withdrawal, something that's not just cash payments. And that's the list. And obviously there's many more red flags that I didn't talk about. Maybe I'll talk about in the future videos, but that's the list for now. Let's get into a summary for those who didn't watch the video and skipped. Red flag number 5 was if the landlord requests a deposit prior to signing any sort of document, whether it be a standard form of lease, a tenancy agreement, a lease agreement, an agreement to lease, whatever it is. If the landlord requests that you submit a deposit prior to signing a contract with you, then that's a major red flag. Red flag number 4 was if the landlord is a small-time property management company and you cannot find much information about them online, and if you do, the information is not so good. Even if they have a professionally done website that looks outstanding, but it doesn't list other properties they're currently managing, or it does but does not list a way where you can verify the fact that they're currently managing that property. And even if you can find some feedback and it's mediocre to negative, that is a major red flag. Red flag number three. Red flag number three was if the landlord, in Ontario specifically speaking, asks for a pet deposit. Because where I work, which is Toronto, Ontario, Canada, pet deposits are illegal. Yes, many a landlord do ask for it, but they're doing it in an illegal fashion. I mean, like I said, it's technically illegal to go more than 100 on the highway where I live, but we go 120, 110 all the time. So it does happen, but it is a red flag because such a request is illegal according to the Residential Tenancy Act of Ontario. Red flag number two is when your landlord or potential landlord refuses to have any email or written correspondences with you, whether it be text, email, as I just said, or if you live in the 1800s, you write him a letter or whatever. The reason this is a red flag and a major one is their refusal to even provide you potentially with their email is a sign in itself that they might be a shady character and not the best landlord. Because if they only having correspondence with you regarding matters relating to the property and maintaining it and who pays for what, and hey, can you fix this tomorrow? Hey, can I drop by tomorrow? If those conversations are being had verbally on the phone or in person, there's no written record of it. If they're being vague and they don't want written record of it, they don't want you to email them, they don't email you with any inquiries, then that's a red flag because there's no written record, and if the dispute occurs, then they have the leverage. Maybe you may have the leverage, but on average, I'm more so speaking of. And that red flag really cuts both ways, to be honest with you. I mean, it's in the best interest of the landlord to have a written correspondence as well, you know, something on record. And red flag number one is when the landlord or the potential landlord wants all cash payments for the monthly amount due. Whether it's, you know, all cash for the whole year up front or month to month, you know, it doesn't matter. If they want all cash payments, they most likely want it because they don't want to claim it on their taxes as a extra revenue source. So they don't want to claim the rental income they're getting for whatever reason. And that's a red flag because often what accompanies that request is you not signing a lease. As well, let's say you do pay them the all cash payment due for that month and they come back and say, hey, I never received it. Once there's no written record. That's why in Ontario where I work, the majority of the time in tenancies, what occurs is the rent is paid with checks, whether it be post-dated checks, certified checks, or just checks written at that very moment, or e-transfers or direct withdrawals. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your feedback is appreciated. My contact information is in the description box. I actually have a very cool video coming up in a month. Many more videos coming out in between then, but I have a very cool video that I'm looking forward to editing and releasing. And yeah, we're slowly growing, you know, and I thank you for watching.